And last year it was that Hopkins trade that was the big offseason move for the NFC West teams collectively. This year we've already got a trade ready to go. 17 days from now, 4:01 p.m. Eastern, Matthew Stafford officially arrives as the quarterback of the LA Rams. Jared Goff officially leaves the Rams, sending 2 future first-rounders and a third-rounder this year to make that transaction happen. Does the addition of Matthew Stafford to the Rams make the Rams the favorite? They are the favorite. Should that be the case? Plus 165 via points bet. Is that fair in your assessment when you consider the other teams, Chris?
I do. I think it's fair. I think, all those teams got a little work. Seattle, we know where they're at. The 49ers got a few moves they got to make. The Rams aren't perfect, but damn, when you just look at that defense, of course, McVay's ability to run the ball, the running backs are set up and everything like that. Hey, the offensive line we know can use a little work. There's no doubt about that too. But I look at them as the favorite in the NFC West. I do, and I think they're going to be dangerous with Matthew Stafford pulling the trigger out there. I expect them to be a lot more explosive, and I think Sean McVay is going to be able to open up the offense, a few levels more just because of Stafford and his abilities and what he can do.
Another encouraging development for the Rams, Cam Akers, second-round pick from Florida State last year. McVay had a media session last week, and he said, among many other things, he spoke for a very long time, but he said Cam Akers is an every-down back, and I think he's earned that. It was 3 guys going into 2020. It's 1 guy now in Cam Akers, and that will help. Not that he's Todd Gurley or that he's going to be Todd Gurley in his heyday, but that's when Jared Goff was at his best. You give Matthew Stafford a back like that, and he's never had a back like that.
Right.
Man, that makes things different for Stafford as well, Chris.
Agreed. I mean, Akers is nice. They got a nice compliment to him, but you're right. Akers is a guy that we saw can be a little bit of a game breaker and can do it all. I mean, run between the tackles, bounce it outside, take it up the sideline for 60 yards. He's got everything about it. I saw him in person at Florida State. Was impressed with him the second I saw him. You could ask me and Mike Tirico a few years back. We were gushing about the guy. He's big time. So, that the offensive side of the ball, and then you talk about the tight ends and Woods and Cooper Kupp and, the kid they took out of Florida last year, Vance, right? And they're set up. Vance, excuse me. They're set up for Matt Stafford to take full advantage of this offense and really make some big-time plays on that side of the ball. I don't sit here and go, hey, their offensive line, we know, hey, Whitworth up there in age. Could there be a few improvements on the offensive line? Certainly, but there's not a lot of offensive issues I have with the Rams when I look at them. Even with the offensive line, I go, man, McVay's the master of managing a game and also figuring out how to hide little deficiencies within that offensive line, too. That's where I give him a lot of credit. So I don't look at the offense as a big thing for them this offseason. The defense, on the other hand, they got some work cut out for them here on that side of the ball because of some of the free agents they got.
Well, and because Brandon Staley's gone, Raheem Morris is in as the coordinator, so you've got transition. Again, sooner than Sean McVay thought he would ever have that transition. Surely he would have liked to have kept Staley around for another year or so, especially when McVay is one of these offensive coordinators who basically abdicates responsibility for the defense to the coordinator. I still have that image of McVay sitting on the Gatorade tub with his play sheet and his Microsoft Surface getting ready for the next offensive drive while Wade Phillips was basically running the team. He needs someone he can trust that way.
Yeah, and he will. He'll be able to trust Raheem. I mean, Raheem is, an ex-head coach, Tampa, of course, what he did this year in Atlanta, and he's going to be able to manage that defense and let them fly around. It might not look exactly the same as Brandon Staley and how they attacked it, but nonetheless, I still think it could be one of the top units in football on the defensive side of the ball. But they have 2 marquee free agents, in my opinion, that I look at that go, how does this going to work out? They're not in the best salary cap, situation as we know. And Leonard Floyd was special for them last year. Leonard Floyd is a really, really good football player. Yeah, he's not like on the average a 12 sacks a year type of guy, but wow, can he do a lot. And he's awesome he's really, really good in all aspects of the game. So you have him, and then John Johnson at safety. I talked about him kind of in depth last week on my podcast, Mike. He's one of the 5 best safeties in football for my money, for sure. Can they figure that out? I mean, can they keep they got to try to keep one of them, certainly. And I don't know if they can possibly keep 2 with the status they're at right now.
Yeah, look, that's the problem when you constantly flip first-round picks for veterans that you have to pay big money to. You end up with not enough guys who are working for relatively less than what veterans command, especially if you have great players. You can only pay so many people. And when you are watching so much money walk away, like Brandon Cooks, like Todd Gurley, like Jared Goff, it exacerbates the problem. And this was something Peter King mentioned on Friday, and this leads to my next point as to how much pressure Sean McVay is under. Because at some point, Stan Kroenke is going to start looking at the numbers and looking at the return and looking at all this money that has been paid to guys that they are either cutting or trading away. And in the case of Jared Goff, even though it's not obvious from the surface, they gave up draft capital to get that contract off the books.
Right.
At some point, there's an awkward conversation to be had between Stan Kroenke and Sean McVay.
Yeah, I mean, and Les Snead along with that. There's no doubt. Hey, they play on the edge. That I don't know. I love them because they're aggressive as hell. They really are. And it is like every year, how are we going to make a move to try to win the Super Bowl? I love that aspect about them. Because of that, though, and years of leverage and doing those things like you've talked about, it's put them in a tough spot. There's no doubt. Their one, saving grace is that they've been very good in the draft. Even with the guys that aren't marquee names, you'd go, who the hell is this guy? Whoa, he's playing good for them. They just got so many of those guys around the roster, too, to where they've been able to kind of prove us all wrong with the way they attack it, and that's been interesting. But you're right. They're playing with fire. They're on the edge, and there's not a ton of depth on the football team. And fortunately for them, they haven't had to deal with the injury bug a whole lot the last few years either.
And the fact that they've done well in the later rounds of the draft, it creates an irony, and I do think the word properly applies in this context. As I've said before, I never know thanks to that damn song. But one of the theories out there is that they're constantly trading away their first-round picks because they don't want to be judged for blowing first-round picks. And in my estimation, that is a scar from what they did with the picks they got in the RG3 trade 9 years ago, because Les Snead was the GM at the time. So you never get killed for blowing your first-round pick if you take those first-round picks and turn them into proven players.
Well, I think there's certainly some truth to that. I don't deny that. The other thing too, I do wonder at times is just how long are Les Snead and Sean McVay in this for? We heard rumblings about Sean McVay in the Monday night booth and all of that stuff a few years ago. I know there's some people in league circles that think he could do the whole John Gruden route. He's a psycho. So he is the type of guy like a Dick Vermeil or a John Gruden who can kind of burn himself out and maybe may need to take a step away from the game at some point. So that's another thing that at least crosses my mind when they make these moves, to where maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they're like talking to each other and going, hey, we're only going to do this for 3 more years. So let's
go all in. Let's try to get
the hell with the next
regime.
Ring. Right. Let's just us try to win and see where it goes. At least it's crossed my mind several times.
Once Tony Romo got to $18 million a year.
Oh, game changer.
In the broadcast booth, I think that's prompted a lot of coaches and players to think, wow, the streets are paved with gold if you can get one of these spots. Now, good luck getting one of the spots, but I agree with you. McVay has the opportunity to slide into a broadcast booth, be kind of like a John Gruden, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but to the extent that we have some Monday Night Football games on ABC next year, that's going to put pressure on ESPN and Disney to pump up that booth, and it's gonna put more money in play, and you never know. Right. I mean, Jimmy Johnson left the Cowboys in late April. Now, it was different circumstances, but somebody shows up to Sean McVay and drops a pile of money on his desk that is as much or more than what he's making to coach the Rams.
With much less work.
Can you rule out that he'd say, I'm out of here? Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out for myself. I mean, at what point are you truly locked in for the next year?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to do the research to see what the latest retirement or resignation was for a coach into an offseason. It's one thing to get fired like Jimmy Johnson kind of was. But, if this deal goes – now, I don't think the new Monday Night Football thing would kick in until next year, so that probably wouldn't happen. I just think it's something, you're right, we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Absolutely need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, keep an eye on. Certainly, the Matt Stafford thing's going to give him some juice, and I think he's going to want to see this through to a degree. So that I think it's something they'll look forward, to a few years down the road. Do I think that's a possibility? I certainly think, the look of the situation could lend itself to that possibly happening, to like what you're saying.
Yeah. And that means they keep burning bright as long as they can to try to get that Super Bowl win that they almost got a couple of years ago. And they've still got some great players on the team. The question is, can they pull it all together? Can they get it done? Matthew Stafford definitely makes them better. Nothing against Jared Goff. Stafford makes them better. The expectations will be higher, as we saw at the top of the segment. The PointsBet Sportsbook has them as the favorites from a betting perspective.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.